Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is our particular pleasure to welcome you at the session From Vision to Practice for a Just Transition for All, a cross-regional South-to-South policy dialogue on energy, sustainable finance, and enterprises for inclusive policy making and enhancing NDC ambition. We have not a very numerous, but a very highly competent audience. And let's skip note of the fact that our proceedings are going to be broadcast to Europe, Central Asia, Asian, Pacific, and Latin American regions, and the broadcast through ILO will be provided to the rest of the world. So it is our particular pleasure to welcome you at this very important event. And before we give the floor to the keynote speakers, would like to present a very interesting historic backtrack of the accomplishments of Azerbaijan in the field of labor. With this, I'm honored to introduce a short video material, the first collective agreement in the East in 120 recent years. It's provided by Azerbaijani Ministry of Labor, Social Protection of Population, Trade Unions Confederation, National Confederation of Entrepreneurs and Employees Organizations. So, the first collective agreement in the East in last 120 years.
Date 1904. Mazet Full Oil Constitution, one of the first collective agreements between an employer and employee, was signed in Azerbaijan and in the world. This historic event, which took place 120 years ago, was one of the most important transitions in labor relations of its time. Date 2024. Azerbaijan is hosting COP29 on climate change. With a just transition to green technology, job retention, and the transformation of a new era in employer-employee relations, Baku is once again at the center of global attention. What's the Mazet Constitution? Azerbaijan was the first country in the world to transition from manual labor to industrial method in oil production. This was made possible through the ingenuity, new invention, and innovation of our dedicated oil workers. Exactly 120 years ago, one of the most collective agreements between employer and employee, Mazet Constitution, was signed in Azerbaijan. The employers accepted demands for a 9-hour workday, 4 days off per month, 1 month's leave per year, wage increases, the implementation of 3-shift system, and the elimination of inequality among the workers of different nationalities. Oil is a natural resource of the world, the most valuable resource. However, its people, and has always been, will be in the case. At the beginning of the 21st century, within the framework of COP29 in Azerbaijan, the transition to green technology and the human factor in this transition remains a leader. Because for the people to live healthily, they need an ecologically clean and green world, as well as just and decent work.
Dear friends, I would like to congratulate you all on the occasion of the 120th anniversary of the Mazet Constitution, the first collective agreement on labor relations in the East. As you can see, we have a long history of social partnership. It's encouraging to see that we are continuing to work successfully to make decent work happen. I have no doubt that we will make a significant contribution to ensuring social justice as we move towards a green economy. I wish you all great successes in your future endeavors.
Dear event participants, the 120th anniversary of the signing of the Mazet Constitution between Baku oil industrialists and workers is coming to an end. The document marked in the history as the first collective bargaining agreement worldwide that recognized the workers' rights and gave them a new status. On the occasion of this anniversary, I sincerely congratulate all the workers globally. Ladies and gentlemen, the consequences of climate change as one of the biggest challenges of the modern world have also spread to the economic and social spheres. Therefore, in the process of transition to the green economy, trade unions have important functions such as protecting existing jobs, monitoring compliance with the principles of justice, and keeping the issue of employment in mind. We are confident that the COP29 results will help us to achieve our goals in this regard. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Değerli dostlar,
Valuable friends, 2024 is the year of solidarity for green world in Azerbaijan. This year we also celebrate the 120th anniversary of the Mas'ud Constitution, the first agreement document between employees and employers in the East. This event is one of the historical firsts, and the Azerbaijan society established the first democratic republic in the East at the beginning of the 20th century and gave women the right to vote for the first time in the East. This event, which gave impetus to the strengthening of the state employer-employee relations, continues to develop in a more progressive form. We believe that Azerbaijani employers and employees will find new professions in the transition to green economy and flexible transformation to define jobs into new professions. We are sure that this event in Azerbaijan will leave a significant mark in world history, and the world community will refer to the decisions made in Azerbaijan. Congratulations once more, and wish you success in future endeavors.
It is really, in fact, very symbolic that today's event has coincided with quite an important historic milestone, which was the first collective agreement signed in Baku back in December 1904. And with this very nice segue, I would like to hereby invite our opening keynote speakers to take their places. We'll invite them three by three. So the first person to take the floor is Mr. Sahil Babayev. Followed by Mr. Marcus Neto, please, and Ms. Beate Andreas. So please welcome our first group of panelists. And with no further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Sahil Babayev, the Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Population of the Republic of Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much. Dear guests, dear colleagues, esteemed moderator, it's a great pleasure being here, meeting with you, discussing the possibility for enlarging our cooperation in mitigating various challenges that climate change will cause on the world. Climate change has got very big impact on daily life of each individual, and it has a big fundamental change in various dimensions. It changed the nature of the work. It changed the nature how we do live. If you look to the overall activities, we will need more greener economy. We will need green jobs. We will need green skills. So we have to educate. We have to work on preparing our human resources to mitigate the challenges that the green economy will require from us. We have to campaign. We have to raise the awareness regarding the opportunities, job opportunities, skills, competences on the green economy, as well as we have to work on the more sustainable and resilient social mechanism, social protection system. Because at the end of the day, climate change will affect primarily the vulnerable groups of the people. It will affect young people, it will affect women, it will affect disabled people, and of course we have to concentrate our social support mechanisms on supporting this level of the people. In Azerbaijan, we have made a lot of change and reforms in the social sphere. During the last 5 years, we have adopted 4 social reform packages. We have increased minimum salaries for 2.7 times. We have increased minimum pensions for 2.5 times. We have increased social allowances and benefits 5 times. We have formalized the economy. The overall salary fund of the country have increased almost 3 times. And of course, all these reforms, the primary beneficiaries of these reforms were the vulnerable groups, the people in need, and people who need to be supported. On the other hand, we have introduced a very big mechanisms of the digitalization. Today, more than 90% of our services are done in the digital platforms, which actually decreases the time a person loses for bureaucratic procedures. It decreases the level of engagement, of physical engagement, and of course it's good for the environmentally sound procedures. On the other hand, we have introduced one-stop shop. And of course, all these reforms have been highly recognized by the international community. During the last 2 years, our single one-stop shop, DOST agency, our digitalization activities, our social support mechanisms have gained more than 100 international awards. And we will continue on these type of activities which enable the access for everyone, especially for the vulnerable groups. At the end, I would like to highlight a couple of very important issues that we have managed to agree during this COP29. We have made a good progress on the implementation of Article 6. I think that this is a very strong and sound message to everyone. We have made a good progress on the multilateral institutions' commitment toward the mitigating climate change issues. This is also a very strong signal. But the most important signal was that more than 80 heads of states, heads of governments have pledged their commitment to the greener world, to the greener economy, greener job, and of course, greener skills. And I think that this is the most important message, because only together, collectively, we can manage to mitigate this challenge. We as a human being have created this problem. And it's actually for us as a human being to mitigate these problems. Therefore, I would like to thank particularly ILO and all our international partners for engaging these type of platforms to discuss, to evaluate, and to prognose our future activities, how to mitigate the challenges that we'll be facing in the nearest future. It will not take a long time. It's already and it's nearby. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished minister. The valued efforts of your ministry will clearly pay its own contribution to changing labor climate in the country and probably in the whole of the region. And with this very nice introduction, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Marcus Neto, Assistant Secretary General and Director of UNDP's Bureau of Policy and Program Support. So the floor is yours, Mr. Neto.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Your Excellency Minister, pleasure and congratulations on the great work. My dear friend Beat, thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be with ILO and all the other colleagues here. The opportunity for member states to share lessons on how do they go through this road of the transition and to a green economy is why a network was created called PAGE. And UNDP has been a member of PAGE from the beginning. Right? It's a UN Partnership for Action on Green Economy. It's been going on for about 10 years. The last year, PAGE updated its strategy to better respond to growing country demand on integrating technical support to transform their economies towards greener, more circular pathways in line with commitments to the goals of the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and now the Global Biodiversity Framework, land degradation neutrality, and environment agreements. Now, we are embarking on a process from COP29 to COP30 of supporting countries to develop their nationally determined contributions to be presented in my hometown of Belém in Brazil next November, a year from now. NDCs are becoming extremely important planning process and policy statement towards this green transition. National ownership of NDCs, as they are designing the Paris agreements as a bottom-up sovereign commitment, are essential elements of this green transition. And more, NDCs 3.0 now, a document that should be looked at by governments as an opportunity to bring together climate action, nature, biodiversity action, and economic, right? So how do you build the skills for the future? How do you look at the industry transformation? Those are not things that we thought about being part of an NDC 1.0 or 2.0, but they should be part of the NDC 3.0 going forward. The Secretary General of the United Nations has made a huge emphasis on the importance of ambitions 1.5 aligned NDCs, and have asked us at the United Nations Development Programme to lead the UN system through our infrastructure called the Climate Promise, towards supporting 120, 130 governments into doing this work. What we are doing here is also combining, as I said, the NDCs with another big acronym. We love the acronyms in the UN, the NBSAPs, which is the equivalent of the NDCs for the Biodiversity Convention. We just had a wonderful meeting of the Biodiversity Convention in Colombia 3 weeks ago, and we're going to Saudi Arabia for the third Rio Convention in 10 days' time. You know, it's a bit of odd attending all of those meetings, burning the carbon, right? But that's the way we're doing this. We at UNDP are trying to combine those elements and move towards the green transition, and we focus on three things. One, strengthening policy coherence. How do you integrate it and digitally optimize the NDCs, the NBSAPs, the NAPs, the National Adaptation Plans, and all combining into this third generation of NDCs. Second, finance. This is the COP of finance. It's a lot of conversation about our finance. Great progress on Article 6.2, 6.4, more yet to be done. Now, how do you create the financial planning behind an NDC, behind an NBSAP, so those documents are not only policy statements, but they are investment plans? One of the things we are doing with other partners in the UN and outside is to bring an effort of financial strategies, right, behind those documents, so they can actually have a cost, a plan, a sectoral understanding on that. And third is working on the ground. At the end of the day, this has to happen and has to make a change in people's lives, right? So we have to lend those portfolios in a way that generate a change towards that green economy. So we, as part of PAGE, with governments like the Azerbaijan governments and others, are fully committed to spend the next 12 months not only putting in places the policy architecture that needs to be done toward the green transition, but also moving to implementation. Because at the end of the day, a policy is as good as it hits the road and changes people's lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nato. And now I'm pleased to introduce our third keynote speaker, Ms. Beate Andreas, Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia of International Labour Organization.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Esteemed Minister for Labour and Social Protection, Mr. Babayev, dear representatives of our social partner organizations, the ITUC and the IOE, dear friends of our UN partner organizations, from UNDP, Marcus, Dimitri from the UNEC, and many other UN agencies who have supported us in the preparation of this event, also through PAGE and the issue-based coalition for Europe and Central Asia, and excellencies from neighboring countries, vice ministers, social partner representatives, dear guests. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this first regional event on Just Transition in the Just Transition Pavilion. I would just like to build on what Marcus said. The link between social and financing is absolutely critical. And I had the honor this morning to be welcomed by the Minister and to see what has been done on the reform of the social protection system. And the financing of those systems is absolutely key. And I think it is quite fitting that we are opposite the World Bank pavilion. It makes again the point that we need to bring the social and the financing together. But I also would like to say very quickly in my opening remarks that I think we all recognize today that the urgency for effective climate action is undeniable. We see it in our region everywhere. We see the destruction of lives. We see the destruction of businesses. We see also how climate change impacts on our societies and economies. So we see the significant challenges ahead of us. The ILO data shows that 2.4 billion workers are already exposed to excessive heat today. We know that millions are at risk of being impacted by climate-related hazards. And these hazards don't only impact on the life and the health of workers, but, as I said, they also undermine stability and economic growth. But let us focus also on the opportunities, because there are many opportunities for a just transition and a greener future. By investing in green jobs, in sustainable enterprises, by promoting the principles of a circular economy, and to create a fairer society. We are convinced the green and just transition will create new jobs. But we also know that it will lead to the elimination of other jobs. And as we've seen in the movie, this happened before in history. So therefore, we believe that ministries of labor, workers and employers organizations have a very important role to play in the negotiation of the NDCs, but also in the broader development of strategies to mitigate the impact of climate change. Because they can, and they already do, identify and address the social and labor implications of climate action. They promote social dialogue and tripartite cooperation. They support the development of green skills, as we already heard, and training programs. The adoption of sustainable business practices. We heard already, we talked about the adoption of social protection systems. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the opportunity to hear more from the representatives of workers and employers organizations and from other government representatives today. I'm very pleased that we are able to convene this workshop here today, and thank you again, Minister, for all your support. And I wish us all a very fruitful exchange of ideas, and look forward also to hearing from your experiences. Thank you very much.
Well, let's give a well-deserved round of applause to our first three keynote speakers who really provided a very positive impact to further development of our dialogue on strengthening climate plans to promote green jobs, sustainable enterprises, and circular approaches for a just transition. And with that, to keep in the same positive vein, I would like to hereby invite the next group of our keynote speakers. Once again, a round of applause to the keynote speakers that we've seen right in front of us. And this group is to be followed by another very important and value expert input from Mr. Dmitry Maryashin, Mr. Eric Manzi, and Ms. Sonia Mohammed Janahi. So let's welcome the next group of our keynote speakers. And with no further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dmitry Maryashin, Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECE, co-chair of the UN Issue-Based Coalition for Europe and Central Asia, Environment and Climate Change. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Mr. Minister. It's a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of UNECE and the Issue-Based Coalition. We heard already that climate change is not only undeniable, but undeniably affecting every aspect of our life, our economy, and is threatening the competitiveness of, I think, all sectors of the economy, including in this region. Now, the region we're in, the region that some describe as Europe, but I would more fair to say Europe and Central Asia, spanning, in the case of UNECE, 56 countries from Canada to Tajikistan. Now, this region hosts many beautiful things, but also 10 out of 20 most emitting economies by GHG emissions. It also is very clear that 3/4 of those emissions come from energy production and use. And this is why this region, being an important energy powerhouse, is at the same time a source of a lot of inequity and a lot of pollution and global warming. Now, the countries in Europe and Central Asia region have taken commitments to decarbonize, have adopted their nationally determined contributions, have pledged to reach net zero by 2050 or 2060 in some cases. But commitment is just the first step. What we need is a very granular answer to the question of how we're going to reach net zero by 2050 or 2060. And that is not an easy task. First, because it requires a whole of government approach. It's not one ministry responsible for it. It requires different stakeholders working together, including, of course, unions and employers. It requires a very clear understanding of scenarios that are out there, because just saying we're going to do this is not working anymore. In real terms, we need to be prepared for multiple scenarios, also taking into account unpredictable climate-induced weather events that can upset the best-made plan overnight. And in doing this, we need to remember that while the word just transition has been put as a term in most of the decarbonization pledges by countries, in most of the NDCs, in big statements, actually not enough has been done to make this transition really just. And there are many facets of the transition, and you can see some really important quotes out there that talk about who is being included and excluded. What are the opportunities for a new type of jobs, and so on and so forth. I will not repeat the points that are made in the excellent concept note for this event. But one aspect, in a few aspects I'd like to draw your attention to that are not talked enough. First, there is a transboundary element of just transition. Some of the trade rules and trade restrictions being introduced with a very noble purpose of greening the economy may lead to exclusion of major sectors of the economy in developing countries and may lead to jobs being lost. If we don't adjust, if we don't actually help countries understand what, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism means for them and how to tackle it, not to undermine their competitiveness. Another topic where this is coming to light is the critical energy transition minerals, a topic of the high-level panel by the Secretary General of the UN. The report of the panel was launched here last week, and it is very, very clear. Thousands of communities around the world, including in least developed countries, including in rural areas and in indigenous communities, will be left behind if we don't manage critical minerals upscaled extraction with just transition in mind. And the third element that is not spoken about enough, and this is in fact a topic of our excellent collaboration with the ILO and other partners, including UNFPA, is aging. If you read the recent issue of the Foreign Affairs, it has one striking article. For the first time in 700 years, the world will start losing population. In the next 20 years, it's going to happen. For the first time, most of the biggest economies will be highly aging societies. And the way we design our green transition today, with still a youth bulge in many developing countries, is not a sustainable way, because it doesn't account for the aging society of 20, 30 years from now. And we need to take decisions today that account for that. So with these in mind, as well as the question of finance, which I will not dwell upon because Marcus spoke about it very well, the issue-based coalition in this region has been providing support, policy-based support, guidance, training to the resident coordinators and the country teams in the Europe and Central Asia region. We hope it's been valuable. Just recently we held a very well-attended webinar on this topic, and Just Transition was a key pillar of that discussion. And of course, beyond trainings, we work with the governments around the region to make sure that when a coal mine is closed, they know exactly what to do, retraining, reskilling, but also taking care of the ecological legacy. And then when a critical mineral project is opened or a mine is reopened, they also know what to do, because unfortunately or fortunately, the region now has both cases as real cases as we progress towards the Paris Agreement goals, and we need to simultaneously phase out coal and fossil fuels and bring in more critical minerals to power the EV revolution or the digital revolution as such. With this, let me just say that UNEC is very committed to be part of this movement, to be contributing to PAGE and to the outcomes of this event, and I look forward to a very productive discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mariashin, for pinpointing a bunch of important issues that will find its further discussion in the follow-up panels. And with that, I'm pleased to give the floor to Mr. Eric Banzi, Deputy General Secretary of International Trade Union Confederation.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished participants, thank you for inviting the International Trade Union Organization Confederation for this policy dialogue. The title of this session illustrates the important challenge that we have. However, we would like to turn the sentence around. From our perspective as a trade union movement, the just transition is the tool to make strong climate plans that deliver green jobs, sustainable enterprises, and circular approaches. As you all know, climate change is not a distant threat anymore. It's our current reality and it's impacting the workers. Disproportionately so in the Global South. Workers are in the front line of the climate change. We are seeing a global heat stress that is creating real risk for the workers' life and devastating floods that are wiping out livelihoods, especially workers in conflict zones and those in vulnerable sectors like care work and informal labor. For us, just transition is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's our hope for survival. Without a just transition, the climate crisis will continue to widen social and economic inequality and suffering, further marginalizing workers and communities who have contributed at least to global emissions. Just transition policies need to be grounded in the ILO fundamental labor rights, especially freedom of association, social dialogue, and collective bargaining. How can workers deal with the impact of climate change and climate policies if they are not allowed to organize themselves collectively or are not invited in the table? Climate change had also a profound occupational health and safety impact, as the ILO regional director said. Occupational and health and safety is a fundamental labor right. We think about the enormous increase of the heat waves leading to massive number of often fatal victims. Yet, the voice of workers are too often sidelined for crucial discussion affecting their livelihoods and future. That's why the global labor movement came to Baku with two headlines demands. First is to mobilizing radical and ambitious climate finance through new collective quantified goals that ensure a fair and equitable transition. Public grant-based finance from global north countries is urgently needed to support developing countries in building resilient zero-carbon economy. We need just transition criteria explicitly mentioned in the climate finance decision. The second point is the just transition in the nationally determined contribution NDCs in the climate plan, the national climate plans. Social dialogue and stakeholders consultation will lead to the necessary support in society for the ambitious climate policies. Who is going to pay for the devastating impact on the climate change? Who is benefiting from it? Social dialogue is crucial to deal with these questions. Policies can be only be fair when they are negotiated with the people affected. In the last round of the climate plans, only 1 out of 3 NDCs mentioned just transition. And even the plans that include language of just transition were often not consulted with the social partners. We are calling all the governments to include just transition chapters in their NDCs that are due next year. And all these plans should be consulted with the trade unions. If you didn't speak with the unions, it's not a just transition. As said previously, as a global labor movement, we are in the same line. Is the climate plans to promote green jobs, sustainable enterprises, and circular approach for a just transition. We are together and to succeed on the just transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manzi. And to conclude our opening remarks, I have a pleasure of giving the floor to the last but far not least important speaker, Ms. Sonia Mohammed Janahi, Vice President for Asia at International Organization of Employees, IOE. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fuad. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Beata for arranging, an all ILO team, for arranging such an amazing event and having such diversified participants and stakeholders to discuss such an important subject, which is very dear to all of us and obviously requires the necessity to have all members involved to ensure that we reach a common goal for everyone. And this is very important, and thank you, ILO, for doing that. Honestly, we at ILO, of course, we represent members' organizations, and we work with more than 140 organizations and countries globally, and focus on labor and employment policies to support all the employers' organizations to benefit from all the policies that are discussed and that are issued, and to ensure that we align countries, whether it's governments or employers associations or unions, to ensure that we always have a common goal, and that is for the best interest of everybody. Because at the end of the day, no country will flourish if we don't align the benefits of all parties together, and this is very important to us, especially under the IOE umbrella. We're very glad to see green skills and just transition discussion rise up in the agenda and climate discussions here, because we believe consideration of socioeconomic impacts and challenges is very important in the context of climate action. This is also why we have been organizing the Employers Green Skills Pavilion, and will continue to do so, and we invite you all to please visit us in the E-Zone. We would be happy to answer any questions or any concerns that you may have, and we will be definitely committed to do this in all the COPs coming forward. Climate action policies need to place employment opportunities at the center and foster social inclusion, and which is sadly not always the case. And we need to deal with growing challenges in terms of job losses, skill mismatches, inequalities, and potential business closures. What we see today is that, unfortunately, supply will not be efficient for demand, and there will be a big gap. And if we don't cooperate, all of us today, and move in the same process, then we will face a situation where there will be a problem, and unfortunately, many businesses will be closed down. Sadly, the most to be affected are SMEs, which represent in many economies more than 90% of the companies. And to see SMEs, which are in many cases also run by locals, entrepreneurs, be closed down because they cannot cope with the transition, then that will be a major consequence and a negative effect on all economies. Workforce shortages are already seen as a barrier to decarbonizing in almost every sector in the economy. Workforce demand in several transition trades will exceed supply in the coming decades, and failing to address this issue will be a major consequence. In order to have strong investment and financing for job creation and a just transition, we need strong signals and ambition from governments, clarity and certainty in regulations and policy plans, as well as public sector support to ensure that we reduce the risk to the possible minimum for every country. Skills policies need to be aligned also to ensure that we focus on migration and labor mobility policies, and to also include measures of certification and recognition. We want to see relevant policies that foster and support for sustainable enterprises and SMEs, skills development and anticipation and vocational and technical training programs, as well as entrepreneurship and innovation. These policies can be brought together in a coherent framework and concrete roadmap in the NDCs, and thus provide stronger signals and foundation for investable projects that can have an impact in the real economy. And this is here where we can hopefully see a lot of PPPs, private-public partnerships, coming into perspective to fill in the financing gap that is required. So we definitely do appreciate and understand this is not something that governments alone can handle. The private sector will play a major role and has to play a major role. Our members in all countries present here need to work closely together with governments and workers to develop coherent plans that are based on evidence and labor market needs of today, while also being adapted and resilient enough to face the future needs. I thank you all very much, and we look forward to building alliances and collaborations together now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Janahi. So with this kind of blessing from the national, international, and UN structures, this way or another involved in just transition, I would like to embark on our first session on interregional sharing of solutions to support green jobs, sustainable enterprises, and repositioning labor markets for contributing to inclusive NDCs. But with that, let's give another round of applause to our keynote speakers. And right now, I would like to hand over the floor to Ms. Maria Jose Torres Macha from United Nations Resident Coordinator for Chile, who will introduce the next group of our speakers. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. We are exactly in this panel going to go from a vision to practice. I'm Maria Jose Torres. I work in Chile and the United Nations Resident Coordinator participating in this COP. And I like to, while I'm introducing the conversation, maybe invite the first panelist to take a seat. Ms. Sanji Lee, Ms. Camila Roman, Ms. Vermet Karabaeva, and we have online Professor Ian Miles. So I'm really thankful to ILO to have made the effort to bring the perspective of just transition into the discussions of the COPs, because we know very well that if you are working in sustainable development, and that's the task of country teams and resident coordinators, this is a critical area. So I'm going to just mention 2 or 3 things that are essential as we process to the conversation with our panelists. The first thing is that we would like to see NDCs as an opportunity, and I think my colleagues before mentioned that. It's an opportunity not just to do planning in the abstract, but also to be able to integrate the elements that are about to be discussed. I mean, just transition, the future of jobs, the future of growth for countries, and also what is the perspective for people, citizens, workers, into that transition should be an essential part. The UN country teams are supporting governments in the preparation of the NDCs. In particular, in our case, we have at least 6 agencies participating with the technical support and leadership of UNDP on the climate promise. You listened to Marcos Neto in the previous panel. We have ILO extremely engaged in providing technical advice and the platform for social dialogue that is extremely important when we discuss about just transition, particularly when we discuss the inclusion of women, when we discuss elements that are related to the quality of dialogue that is required, and it was presented before. And also we have the important element of not just doing it at the national level, but to get one down and going local. And for that purpose, I think the idea of this panel is to really zoom into practices, best experience, and that's the reason why we are very honored to have the Kyrgyz Republic experience on NDCs. I don't know if they are around. And also because we cannot just ignore that just transition and climate action is going to be affected by another transition. Please join. It's going to be affected by another transition that is coexisting, that is the digital and technological transition. So there is not just transition that will not take into account both the new jobs that are coming, but also the green jobs and how we are preparing for it. I mean, with that, I'd like very much to introduce a very important panel. It is very interesting that we are all women. So I think it means a lot in terms of the issues that we are going to discuss, because actually this is avant-garde, is the forefront of the conversations that we need to have. So first I'd like to present Ms. Sanji Lee, who is the Global Technical Specialist on NDCs, Green Economy and Just Transition, Climate Hub, UNDP. And she is going to present on achieving ambition in the long-term low emissions development strategies and enhanced NDCs. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you can see the screen. We have a short slides that's coming. Can we move to the next slide, please? Back. Can we go to the first slide? Can we move to the first slide?
Can you move one more?
While we're figuring out the technical issues, first of all, very happy to be here in the Just Transition Pavilion. We are working very closely with the ILO team and the entire UN systems. So in my presentation, I'm going to talk about the Climate Promise 2025, as Marcos has mentioned, and also the resident coordinator has mentioned, how we are working closely with the entire UN systems on the NDC 3.0 support. Also, given the focus of the Just Transition, we will be also sharing how the Climate Promise team has been engaging with this topic, especially in integrating these key dimensions in the NDCs, because we know that NDC 3.0 presents a really great opportunity to embed all those dimensions. As we all know, the temperature record continues to be broken. The impacts are increasingly becoming widespread and devastating. And all these impacts are also intertwined with the crisis of the food crisis, biodiversity crisis, we talked about the NBCEP, and also with the international conflict. That's why we believe the next year, during which the countries are expected to revise their NDCs, really stands as the humanity's best opportunity to stay within this 1.5 temperature goal. For that reason, and taking into account this urgency of action, the Secretary General has asked the UNDP's Climate Promise team and its infrastructure to lead the UN's coordinated effort on NDC 3.0. So what is Climate Promise and when did it start? So Climate Promise support started in 2019 in order to provide support to the second generation of the NDCs. So climate support currently is the largest support on NDCs. We have supported more than 126 countries on NDCs, and that represents more than 85% of the developing countries. In terms of the results, the countries that we have supported, more than 91% of the countries raised their ambition, especially the mitigation ambition, with all reference to energy. 93% of those countries also raised ambition in adaptation, which is also the critical part we're hearing a lot. And they also link that with another policy instrument, which is a NAP, National Adaptation Plan. And nearly 95 of NDCs becoming more inclusive, developed in consultations with diverse stakeholders, gender equality, and many of them are now referencing youth in those processes. So in summary, the NDCs were of higher quality, backed by the data, detailed costing, and they're very much linked to the sustainable development aspiration of the countries. So we are leveraging these experiences and infrastructures to provide a concerted efforts on NDC 3.0. So how we're doing this, given the importance of this work, we are relying on the leadership of the UN resident coordinators and UN country team, who is really on the ground supporting the national development processes on a daily basis to bring in different UN agencies and their diverse expertise to provide a coordinated support to countries. So we will be guided by the common framework of support, which is the 3 key pillars of the climate promise, focusing on ambition, acceleration, which is about implementations and finance, and the 3rd key pillar is inclusivity, making sure that we are not leaving anyone behind. We are also guided by the coherent advocacy and outreach. We are guided by the executive office of the SG's office, and we are getting a lot of political direction at the high level, principles levels in defining our political advocacy as well. We are working on the consistent analysis, tools and guidance. For example, working very closely with the UNFCCC. We are working with all the country offices and the governments to understand where the demands are in terms of NDC enhancement. So we have this online database where we are tracking where the support is needed. And we work closely with the NDC partnership as well in order to provide guidance and tools. So you may have heard about the NDC 3.0 Navigator, which will serve as a one-stop shop for everything related to NDCs. So we are also contributing to that joint efforts. The last but not least is, of course, the UNCT meetings. We are using, and as I mentioned, relying on the UN country team for rolling this out on the ground. So just to share a bit of the progress so far, already more than 95 countries have conducted the UN country team meetings specifically on NDCs, asking different UN agencies on the ground on what they can bring to the table on NDCs to support the government. Many have also progressed a lot on the national mapping who can bring what to this table on NDC enhancement. And many countries, some countries now, they do have a work plan that's been agreed by the government, which is called the UN work plan that outlines specific support that the UN will be providing. So the work is starting. So that's a really positive sign. So that was the quick snapshot of how the UNDP Climate Promise 2025 is working with the entire UN systems on NDC 3.0. And I know in delivering all this support on NDCs, it is critical that we embed the dimension of justice, and just transition should be part of this, because we know that without it, none of the ambitious climate actions will succeed. We've learned from the history of the social protest where the decarbonization efforts has been challenging. So in all these efforts, we are trying to make sure that all these principles and processes and practice of just transition is embedded in the NDCs. So with the climate promise, with our key and unique access to the climate policy processes, we have already worked with multiple countries on integrating just transition into NDCs, NAP, and LTLETs. So according to our own analysis, we know that the second generation of NDCs, the reference to the just transition was very limited. Only 38% of the NDCs do refer to just transition, even at a very superficial level, I must say. There's no concrete measures attached to that. Of course, the just transition is more prominently referenced in the long-term strategy, because long-term strategies has more of the socioeconomic focus than the short-term NDCs. So this brings us to think that we believe much more can be done using the opportunity of the NDC revision. So this is the snapshot of the support that we've been providing in integrating just transition dimensions in the NDCs. This is just the initial analysis. The number now is 50 countries. We are working with more than 50 countries on different entry points in just transition in the NDC, NAP, and LTLETs. So how do we see, where do we see the key entry points, and what do you mean by embedding just transition in the NDCs, NAP, and other climate strategies? We believe this is key because NDCs are a politically backed document, which sends a very clear signal to the people, to the government, to the society that this is the transition pathway that we will undertake. And by integrating these just transition dimensions, that also sends a very clear signal that this transition issues, the justice, the human rights, the equity, leaving no one behind is a key political priority of the government. So hopefully later on, the countries can really have some concrete measures on just transition. So we thought it is a key entry points. So the 4 key entry points that we have identified, the first one is a transition impact assessment. I think we are hearing a lot about it. There's entire negotiations regarding the just transition work program, response measures. It is really about understanding how the transition will affect the people, to what extent and how, to people, economy, because there's a lot of uncertainties regarding the cost. We're talking about 50-year structural transformation. So we don't know who will lose and who will win in this transition. So to give a bit of an example, we worked very closely with the ILO team and did some macroeconomic modeling and socioeconomic impact assessment to see how particular NDCs and LTLETs measures will influence the people, how many jobs will be created, who will benefit, how they will impact the GDP of the country, and so on. And that has been very critical because it does create the evidence for the government to prioritize some of their NDC measures based on those multiplier effects. So they can really double down on some of the key NDC measures where that could also contribute to socioeconomic development rather than just mitigation. So we've done that in multiple countries, more than 20 countries. The second part is the stakeholder engagement, all about making the process right, that no one is left behind. And this is the part where we are bringing all sectors, all whole of government and whole of society together so they can define their own pathway and feel the sense of ownership in this journey. So this is an example, I think, of Vietnam, where UNDP is actually supporting the multiple stakeholder consultations in response to the JET-P as per the government's request. In Indonesia as well, UNDP is actually leading the working group on JET-P as part of the government's mechanism. So this is how we are supporting the stakeholder engagement in these processes. The third key entry points we see is the institutional policy and capacity building support. And this is all about making sure that we have the right enabling environments. So all these socioeconomic gains are not automatic. We have to make sure that there is an investment, capacity building, policies, and all there. For example, if we're talking about transition minerals in some countries that they have a lithium, then it is not just about selling those exploitation rights to foreign companies, but making sure that they have the R&D, technology transfer, so they can really move up in the value chain. To give a bit of an example of how UNDP has been supporting these efforts, in countries like Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, we helped them to develop the just transition policy strategy and a roadmap. So that kind of gives a clear signal on where they have to be heading to, followed by a specific capacity building support. So we work with multiple MSMEs to provide a green modeling, reskilling and upskilling. So that had also contributed to job creations and economic development in those local communities. In Belize, for example, we also developed the Blue Entrepreneurship training modules, and all those capacity building related elements are also included in the NDC, being politically backed in a way. Last but not least, key entry point is the finance. Finance is making sure that there is money involved in making the transition happen. So this involved both domestic, international finance. So JETP is a good example where the international cooperation is possible. But also we are leveraging the UNDP's INFF, Marcos has mentioned, which is our integrated national financing framework, to channel the resources for NDCs and SDGs. So a lot of the SDGs talk about key dimensions of the just transition. So this is how we are working with the partners, and we are happy to continue to work with all the partners like ILO, so that we hope to see more of the clear reference of the just transition in the third generation of NDC. With that, I'm going to stop here, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanji, for this fantastic presentation. Please, a round of applause for very clear. I'm sure you can get the copy of the presentation. In case you are not listening properly because there is a lot of noise, we suggest that you can take. We can pass on some of the audio phones, so you can noise cancel because it's very noisy here. So if you need, you can use it. And that takes me to the second presenter. Thank you, Sanji, again. Camila Roman, she is the Senior Technical Specialist Action Program on Just Transitions in ILO, and she is going to present on how NDCs are for a just transition and decent work and sustainable enterprises. Thank you, and the floor is yours. We need to, just the thing is that because we have another panel, we need to be conscious of the time. I'm going to ask everybody to be very conscious. Thank you. You want to use this? Use this, it works. And then let me get this.
Hello? Yes, much better. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I think we had an excellent overview by Sanji about the UN support to NDCs. Of course, NDCs are not the only means to promote a just transition, but they are a very important one. Just transition is about bringing together climate goal, but also inclusive growth and sustainable development. We want to deliver decent work through climate action so that it can foster jobs and social inclusion for countries across the world. The NDCs provide a crucial anchor just for doing that, and the time is now. The next round of NDCs are due in 2025, and that's why as a UN, as ILO, we put a lot of emphasis on this piece. So how does the ILO work on NDCs? We work at the global level and at the country level. At the global level, we are undertaking the development of knowledge products that can help us understand where we stand in terms of the integrations of just transition and in its various dimensions into climate plans. We are also developing guidance and materials that can help countries reflect more closely on the most effective ways to develop their NDCs in a way that considers decent work and sustainable enterprises and leverages different policy instruments. And finally, we are very conscious of the fact that a lot of the learning and the capacity building can benefit a lot by international knowledge sharing, including South-South cooperation, because there are a lot of countries are doing, and so this good learning and good practices that are emerging can benefit other countries in their pathways. At the global level, we just launched a very recent exercise that was a mapping of just transition in NDCs as of July 2024. Why does it matter? Well, first, because it helps us see where we stand, is a state of play, but also because it can help us track how we move forward and the kind of changes in NDCs in terms of integrating a just transition in the next round. This was done in collaboration with the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne that developed a database in collaboration with the ILO, and then we undertook an analysis of that. What are some of the trends and what are some of the things that we're trying to understand from this mapping? First, we are looking at explicit references to a just transition. More or less in line with what Sanjay anticipated from an earlier study of UNDP, we are seeing that 32% of NDCs include an explicit reference to just transition. So that's 62 NDCs out of 193. At the same time, we also know that just transition involves a number of aspects, a number of issues, and we wanted to go a little bit deeper in terms of how these are reflected in the NDCs. Employment, for instance. When you consider whether NDCs look at jobs, we see a much higher number. That's 130 NDCs that consider employment or jobs. Decent work as a term is something that refers also at the quality side of jobs, and there we see a much lower uptake. So we see 20 NDCs out of 193. And finally, a key aspect of just transition is social inclusion and social equity, and there we stand at around 80. Of course, all these variables we are breaking down in terms of regional uptake as well as uptake in terms of income groups by different countries. So I think if some of you is interested in getting to know more about the trends across regions, I invite you to check the mapping up. Going beyond references, I think it's also important to see how in what manner this just transition is reflected in NDC and whether and how it can drive implementation. So what we are considering there is follow-up instruments or arrangements on just transition, explicit financial provision, and references to international cooperation. And as you see across the board, we are all at less than 20% of the NDCs articulating just transition in this manner. But then to bring about just transition, as was mentioned earlier by the panel and by Beate and Marcos, we need really policy coherence. And this means that the NDC needs to refer and speak to other policy domains and vice versa. Other policy domains have to take into account climate considerations. So how are different policy areas reflected in NDCs right now? We know that more than 50%, 56% of NDCs refer to enterprise policies. We know also that skill development is acknowledged by over 50% of NDCs. When it comes down to occupational health and safety, and we know that occupational health and safety is a very important way to contribute to climate change adaptation, because we know the impacts that heat stress, for example, can have on the labor force. But here only 9% of the NDC mention occupational health and safety. When we look at social protection, is around 12%. Active labor market policies that actually are great complements to skills development, we are at around a third of the NDCs. Rights, and this is labor rights and on human rights, are covered by 51%, but typically they are quite they are not necessarily effective in implementable measures. And then in terms of social dialogue and tripartism, and we've been hearing a lot about the importance of social dialogue and tripartism for a just transition, that we are standing at less than 20%. And here we are talking just about textual reference. Again, we are not looking at how extensively those measures are articulated, but I think it provides a bit of an indication of where we stand. So what can we do, building on where we stand now and learning on how countries are addressing just transition in NDC? What's next? How can we make this integration more effective? At the ILO, we came up with an approach that it's a 6D approach for integrating just transition in the NDC. The first 3 Ds are about the what. The what are decent work. Of course, we need job creation, and we need the creation of jobs that are of good quality in order for them to be pathways out of poverty. Secondly, we need to look at the distribution of impacts in terms of climate actions. We know that different groups will be affected in different ways, and we need to understand how that works to come up with the right policy responses. And finally, it's about diversity, equality, and inclusion. We need to make sure that groups in situation of vulnerability are their needs are very well reflected in the NDC to avoid risking that climate action widens inequality rather than reducing them. How do we do that? It's through social dialogue, diagnostics, a granular understanding of impacts of policies and of impacts of climate change, and a way to articulate the formulations of just transition in the NDC in a way that drives action, in a way that drives implementation. And ILO supports countries specifically through these channels. How to give a few examples, when it comes to analysis and diagnostics, we worked very closely with UNDP, as Sanjay has mentioned, on employment and social impacts assessment of climate actions. And we are looking now at policy reviews in order to identify other policy instruments that can be used and leveraged to give effects to those just transition commitments in the NDC and can be integrated in them. Secondly, capacity development of line ministries, because you have a whole of government approach that is needed for just transition and for the NDC's development. So to bring everybody on the same page, getting ministries of labor more familiar with climate action and Ministry of Environment more familiar with decent work and employment issues. And of course, building the capacity of our social partners so that they can really engage meaningful into social dialogue and stakeholder engagement processes, which are our other entry point for supporting just transition in the NDC. Let me end with the importance of unpacking the different aspects and policy area of just transition in NDCs to make the references more effective. And here we have thematic support on a number of policy areas that we mentioned, ranging from sustainable enterprises to skills development and social protection. Of course, all of this is country-driven and it's based on country needs, because that's the best way to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camila, for this very comprehensive presentation on how just transition is part of the work that ILO does. And I think because this panel is about lessons learned, we have a very important case, that is the case of Kyrgyzstan. And we have Ms. Benet Karabaeva, head of the labor unit of the Ministry of Labor, Social Security and Migration of the Kyrgyz Republic, about the role of NDCs in leveraging gender equality. That is one of the dimensions of this just transition. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники. Позвольте мне выступить на русском языке. Изменение климата, она затрагивает сегодня очень это глобальная тема, но самый важный момент – это обсуждение справедливого перехода. В этом ключе гендерное равенство во всех наших национальных стратегиях, она имеет такую ключевую роль и требует особого внимания. Как вы знаете, Кыргызстан горная страна, и 70% занимает горы, и зачастую поддержка женщин, девочек, она с изменением климата она становится еще более сложной. Если мы посмотрим, что представительство женщин в Кыргызской республике в принятии решений, она составляет менее 30%. В этой связи в нашей республике в этом году уже реализуется программа лидерства женщин. Важно увеличивать представительство женщин в принятии решений, так как зачастую те моменты, которые связаны вообще роли женщины в семье, она препятствует ее карьерному росту, получению ее, образованию в таких секторах, как энергетика, промышленность, горнодобывающая промышленность, да. В этих секторах женщины зачастую просто занимают те должности, которые связаны просто с обслуживанием. Почему женщины не могут водить машину, почему женщины не могут стоять у операторного станка? Это несложно, и это не так тяжко. Если вы посмотрите Трудовой кодекс, то есть до сегодняшнего дня у нас действует 400 профессий, где женщины не могут заниматься данной профессией. На сегодняшний день разрабатывается новый трудовой кодекс Кыргызской республики, он у нас обсуждается в Жогорку Кенеше, где мы убираем все эти 400 профессий и вводим такое понятие, что в данных производствах могут участвовать, то есть не могут работать только беременные женщины и женщины с малолетними грудными детьми. Еще один момент хотелось бы отметить. Кыргызстан обновил свой ОНОВ в 2021 году, где включил гендерные вопросы, где отметил, что гендерный дисбаланс в системе принятия решений, отсутствие анализа гендерных аспектов, последствия изменения климата. Мы данные вопросы включили, но остается проблемой обучения женщин в наших горных регионов, получения ими образования. Реализовывая свой проект «Социальный контракт» в республике, где 92% реализуют данные бизнес-проекты женщины, мы столкнулись с той проблемой, что мы не можем элементарно их обучить их обучению. Вставал вопрос, где она оставит детей, вставал вопрос, кто будет заниматься домашними делами. Да? В этой связи мы организовывали выезд наших тренеров в данные села, и это было очень сложно. Поэтому гендерные вопросы в нашей Кыргызской республике мы сейчас уделяем внимание. Это национальный, стратегических документов, таких как «Достойный труд», который разрабатывается до 2030 года. Отдельный раздел у нас посвящен гендеру, гендерному равенству. И в этой связи мы очень даже тесно взаимодействуем с МОД, мы учитываем все рекомендации по гендерным аспектам, и мы считаем, что поддержка женщин именно в условиях изменения климата, когда изменение климата, повышение воздуха, она значительно свое влияние оказывает даже на людей пожилого возраста и на детей, и забота о них зачастую ложатся на плечи женщин. Мы готовы реализовывать призывы ОНОВ, то есть включать в ОНОВ гендерные вопросы. И завтра в Национальном павильоне Кыргызской республики в 4 часа дня также будет рассмотрен вопрос гендерное равенство в горных регионах. И мы всех приглашаем, конечно же, принять в этом сайд-ивенте активное участие. Благодарю за внимание.
So now thank you for bringing us to a concrete case in Kyrgyzstan and the role that was played to incorporate gender perspective into the NDCs and the social transition is very useful. We only have one more presenter, he's online. I don't know if we can connect to Professor Ian Miles, who is Emeritus Professor of the University of Manchester. Is he connected? Professor, how are you? Good to have you in this panel. Thank you very much for being connected. And Professor Ian Miles is going to present on strategic alignment, enterprises, labor and policy for formulating and implementing the NDCs. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much. I have some PowerPoints that I will be showing. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to be here. And many of the points that I want to make have already been made by earlier presentations in this really rewarding meeting. But I think what I can do is to underline some of these points by introducing approaches that we have developed in trying to move beyond the traditional ways of making decisions about long-term issues. So if I could have the next slide, please. What we learned from doing what came to be called foresight activities, it was originally called technology foresight, but we found that the word technology deterred some stakeholders who did not see their core activity as about technology. What we learned was that there are three major elements involved in what we call strategic foresight. And these elements come together to create a strategic conversation that helps us think about the future and to think about how longer term issues and immediate decisions are very closely related together. So next slide, please. The first of the three dimensions is about perspectives. It's about looking ahead. And many topics, when we look ahead, involve decisions that cut across many stakeholders, even many different government departments, because lots of issues are tangled up together. So foresight is a process which helps us address these issues, to look at long-term challenges, to look at immediate decisions and relate them together. And this is a process, as I said, with a number of different stages. We scan the horizon, we look to see what the factors and forces are driving change. We integrate this into our understanding of some different possible ways in which things might develop. We've already had a mention of the importance of taking into account different scenarios. Some different scenarios are the results of us making different decisions now. Some of them are results of factors outside of our decisions, where there are big uncertainties and things may move in different ways. And we need our decisions to be able to deal with uncertain futures as well. We may be building roadmaps, and we've heard again of some transition roadmaps. That's extremely important in terms of identifying who should be doing what, when, what the outcome should be, how the different policies could relate together in produce synergies rather than being contradictory. We had the slogan of let us achieve joined up policy making for this purpose. We can help to develop in a sense of what the priorities are, where there are things we really have to pay attention to immediately, where there are things which addressing rapidly could achieve big things as well in terms of encouraging people to move towards this sort of long-term appraisal, this long-term involvement of different stakeholders. So next slide, please. The activity has to be policy relevant. It's not an academic activity for professors like me to sit around and talk about and write about. It has to be very much tailored to the local policy context, to the ministries, for example, that have agency in achieving particular sorts of policies, in making policies and in implementing policies as well. And that is a key to the NDCs, really. The work has to be conducted in a way that policymakers can understand, using the right language, perhaps giving stories and examples. We've heard some very interesting case studies already today, which can inspire us and help us understand the possible directions of change and the outcomes that we're after avoiding, after achieving. And working in this sort of way can encourage and enable a dialogue about long-term change, about the just transition, about how our immediate decisions are affecting these long-term issues. And finally, there's a big issue here of developing policy-making capabilities, networks among policymakers within the country and beyond, because it's been very typical for many of the key policies we're talking about now to be addressed by different ministries that have not engaged in a great deal of discussion among themselves. And that's at the senior level, and at the level of implementation, often there's almost complete lack of understanding of what different partners are doing. So next slide, please. So the third element is participation. That's involving different stakeholders. And this we have heard a lot about already today. And it's the whole rationale, I think, for these ILO interventions in this excellent meeting. And I think there are three major reasons for engaging stakeholders if we want to achieve a just transition. The first one is what I call the technocratic reason, and that is we simply don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. Knowledge is widely distributed in our society. Who knows what the situation of women in mountain regions is? It's typically the women in mountain regions, for example. We have to find ways of bringing different voices into the process because there's critical knowledge. It's not just a matter of making a decision to invest in one technology or one training program or something like that. The second reason is a democratic reason, that we will not have legitimate policies which can win wide support if these policies are felt to be being imposed from outside. There will be resistance. For one reason, when there is a transition, there are losers as well as winners. And losers can be very vocal about what they are losing. And they're right to be very vocal about what they're losing. And their concerns need to be taken into account as well. And we can achieve more resilience as well if we have more stakeholders built into the process. It will be more capable of responding to changes. And that brings me to the third element here, which is it's emphatic or programmatic, that by engaging stakeholders, knowledge is not only captured, knowledge is diffused. So parties that are involved can go back to their homes, back to their organizations, back to their communities with an understanding of what lies behind the policies. They can explain, they can network, they can build support for the different sorts of policy instruments that they have had a role in helping to shape and define. So these three elements make a very, very strong case for the sorts of stakeholder involvement and participation that the ILO has been promoting in its work for the just transition. And it's very close to what we learned as a message from engaging technology foresight and technology foresight approaches in a whole range of countries previously. So next slide. And the final point I wanted to make is that there is good practice about these sorts of approaches, about foresight approaches, about how to engage stakeholders, how to foster strategic dialogues, and that by sharing this knowledge, by learning from each other's experiences, we can accelerate innovation. We can help to develop similar standards, technological standards, but also standards in terms of social goals of one sort or another. It can give countries that are cooperating more of a voice and more power where it comes to acquiring technology transfer, knowledge transfer with other parts of the world. And of course, a stronger voice where it comes to financing and making the positions, the problems and the achievements of different countries and the region known to the rest of the world. So pooling of resources to help to establish new knowledge, to share existing knowledge, and to build strong relationships to deal with the many challenges that lie ahead of us in this really important transition in this world where climate change is going to continue to create many, many problems for us. It's an absolutely crucial issue. And that is the core of my presentation. Thank you very much. Next slide. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Miles. And I think this is the end of the very excellent panel about how the NDCs can be an opportunity. Please, a round of applause for Camila, for Sangi, for Bermet, and for Ian, who have been a fantastic team to discuss from different angles the NDCs and the just transition. Please, round of applause for them. So we would like to pass, thank you very much, Professor. We would like to pass to the next part of this conversation that is going to be really conversation with three very important actors of this conversation on the just transition. That is Ms. Ziba Mustafaeva, Vice President of the State Oil Company of Azerbaijan, and maybe we invite her to come front. Mr. Zhu Hongren, Executive Vice President and Secretary General of the China Enterprise Confederation. And Mr. Fuad Alekberov, Advisor to the Chair of the Trade Unions Confederation of Azerbaijan. Welcome. So, we have heard a lot in our previous panel about, and I think it was interesting to note that NDCs in general, so more or less 20%, no more, include reference to just transition. We are an NDC 3.0, so countries have an opportunity. Now my question for the panel, and you will have more or less 5 minutes, from your perspectives, is going to be how do we integrate this conversation that we just have about policy coherence, about financing, about dialogue, about rights and decent work into the NDCs. And we are going to start with Ms. Ziba Mustafaeva from SOCAR. There is here. Sorry.
Good afternoon, the distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, valued partners. I'm very honored to be here today with you and present you the view of the SOCAR, which is State Oil Company of Azerbaijan Republic. Climate change, necessity to mitigate the consequences of the crisis that we face, urge everyone to act. And of course, it also urges SOCAR as a company to act, to respond to this. As a company, we have very strong commitment to greener future, and we have already started our journey in the energy transition and just transition, as you say, and energy transformation. Today, SOCAR is a national oil and gas company with operations in all part of its oil and gas value chain, and it's at the beginning of its transformation. But we have a vision to, by 2035, to be a top-tier national energy company with a diversified portfolio of both hydrocarbon and low-carbon businesses and emission profile on par with global energy leaders. By 2050, we aim to be a national energy company that contributes to both energy security and climate resilience on the global scale. SOCAR has given its commitment to net zero by 2050, and we have dropped that down into the milestones and targets how to achieve this. And just a few examples, it's zero routine flaring by 2030, it's minus 30 and minus 20 emission reduction, corporate and absolute emission reductions by 35, and it's near zero methane target by 2035. Of course, to deliver this, we have to act, and we have to act now. And we have three main enablers which support us transformation, which ensure this transformation in the company. It's decarbonization of our cooperations, and I'm talking about starting from exploration up to the sales and trading, the whole value chain. The second is the development of low-carbon business. It's in the solar, wind, geothermal, green hydrogen, and sustainable fuel. And what I would like to zoom in and focus more, considering that we are in Just Transition Pavilion, it's about the organizational transformation and human capital aspect of this transformation. So what we are doing actually, we are changing the DNA of organization. And to support this energy transition, we need to change the operating model, we need to revamp the value chain, we need to make the changes in the structure, we need to reskill and upskill our personnel. And let me give you just a few examples of how we as a business are doing this. Starting from 2023, it was the mid-23, we have approved our new operating model, a new segment which is called Energy Transition, Environment and Decarbonization was created at SOCAR. It's not about creating just one standalone structure, it's about making sure that the work in this dimension is integrated in all aspects of our business. So we also defined KPIs and made them, cascaded them to everyone in the organization. Everyone now has those KPIs embedded in their performance management system, in their motivation system. SOCAR is a company that has more than 48,000 employees in Azerbaijan, and if we talk about globally, joint ventures, subsidiaries, associates, we have around 70,000 employees. We're one of the largest employers in the region, we understand this. That gives us certain advantage, of course, at some point. It's knowledge management, experience, flow that can happen within the organization, but it puts also a lot of responsibility. Responsibility for these people, responsibility that we have the skills to deliver the just transition and deliver the transformation that we have, the climate change actions that we have. And we focus very much on reskilling and upskilling of our personnel. That's, I would say, the cornerstone of our human capital strategy now. SOCAR has its own training and vocational education center, and we have analyzed that we have around like 400 training programs there, which are in-house. It's a knowledge management, it's like institution within the company. And around 20% of that courses are in the green jobs area. And by this I mean health, safety, environment, diversity, inclusion, compliance, waste management, those areas. So what we target to do, because we're happy to have 20%, but is it enough? No, we're target to increase the portfolio in this dimension. And we are partnering in this with different organizations, with different players, with our with different operators, because this is not something that we can achieve alone. Now we are exploring opportunity with Boston Consulting Group on making the skill map of the company, green skill map of the company. So from now to 5-10 years, what green skills we need, how we're going to move to those green skills, what training programs will be there, what career paths will bring that reskilling program. This is what we are focusing and working on. And I would like also to mention that the oil and gas energy industry, from the topic of the gender diversity, you know, like it's a standard for whole the world, that usually it's represented more by male gender. So what we are working on in a just transition to making sure that the vulnerable groups, the groups which are less represented, their voice is heard and they are present and they are on the decision-making table. I'm talking about women empowerment, I'm talking about attracting more women to our industry, about their career paths and promotions, and seeing more women in the leadership roles, of course on equal opportunity. And also gender-wise, generational-wise, sorry, we understand that new generation voice has to be heard, because that's the future which they will be living most part of their lives from now on, right? So making sure that they're on the decision-making table, they set the agenda, we have this inclusive dialogues, is also embedded in our human capital practices, starting from recruitment to development and training and development and retention. At the end, I would like to say, since I know we are limited in time, I would like to say that this year SOCAR has participated first time in its sustainability rating, where we would wanted to compare ourselves how we go against the comparing to the industry against the ESG requirements. And very happy and very proud to say that we received BBB rating. What does it mean? If we look into environment dimension, out of 10 our rating is 7. yes, we have a room to grow. We understand this, and we are committed to deliver this. But comparing to the industry average is 5.4. In the social dimension, our result is, and social, it's health, safety, environment, health, safety, diversity, inclusion. We have 7.5 score, while the industry average is 5.8. At the opening of the COP, the President of Azerbaijan Republic, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, he underlined that well was drilled in Azerbaijan back in 1846. And first offshore oil well was also drilled in mid of 20th century in Azerbaijan by oil workers. Why I'm talking about this is that we have all the beliefs, and we have we think that we have all the capacity to be in the front line of the energy transition and energy security, delivering what we can deliver, and being part of this global dialogues and global actions together. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause of fantastic presentation by Ms. Seva Mustafaeva that brings to the conversation the angle of the private sector in this, because NDCs are presented by governments, but it has to happen in dialogue with the private sector. So I'm very glad to give the floor to Mr. Zhu Hongren, who is the Executive Vice President and Secretary General of China Enterprise Confederation. So another angle into just transition and NDCs from China. Please, the floor is yours.
感谢主持人。我来自中国最大的企业和企业家组织 CEC， 我愿意跟大家分享一些观点。
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I represent the China Enterprise Confederation, the largest business association and employer organization in China. I'm very delighted to have this opportunity to share our perspectives with you all.
当前，世界各国应对气候变化都做出了强烈的政治承诺和做出了有力的安排，像联合国气候框架公约专门提出来的 NDCs， 也对各国提出了新的要求。国际劳工组织也发出了对于进一步的采取包容性的措施，推动这个气候变化框架公约的执行，这个呢也是我们想也能够对各国推动气候框架公约的这个响应和国家自主贡献做出积极的贡献。
Currently, countries have made strong political commitments and clear plans to address climate change. The 2025 NDCs will mobilize more institutions to engage in climate action. The International Labour Organization's principles enshrined in the resolution concerning a just transition towards environmentally sustainable economies and societies for all are conducive to promoting an inclusive NDCs process, ensuring that no one is left behind.
作为全球气候治理的行动派，中国政府对推动气候框架公约的执行做出了积极的承诺，并采取了有力的行动，提出了创新、协调、绿色、开放、共享的发展理念，全力推动绿色发展。
As an active participant in global climate governance, and China and Chinese government also made a very active response to these issues. China adheres to the development concept of innovative, coordinated, green, open, and shared growth.
中国企联作为中国的企业和企业家组织，在积极推动气候治理和绿色发展方面做了一些积极的工作，主要表现在3个方面。
As the representative of Chinese Business Association and employer organizations, China Enterprise Confederation has been committed to promoting Chinese enterprises' efforts in carbon emission control and green and low carbon development. Our efforts include the following three aspects.
一是助力企业开展绿色、低碳、减排的行动。我们积极组织企业，推进这项活动，召开了相应的研讨会，举行了一些这个相互交流的活动，同时呢，支持制定标准，推动这项活动。
Firstly, we assist enterprise. Okay. Firstly, we assist the Chinese enterprises in their carbon reduction efforts. Actually, in response to the 2 carbon goals, CEC has been actively organized seminars, case sharing events, and other activities, working with our member companies to explore the establishment of carbon management systems and develop standards on carbon emission.
二是与中国可持续发展工商理事会联合发布中国可持续发展的指数报告。 对于1038家企业，通过他们对企业的竞争力、环境影响、社会和行业，根据这些数据得出来的指示报告，以对企业可持续发展加以指导。
Secondly, we're jointly working with the China Business Council for Sustainable Development. We released the China Corporate Sustainability Index report, analyzing the sustainability of 1,038 Chinese enterprises based on their competitiveness, environmental, social, and industry development indicators, advocating for a path of resource recycling. Development.
第三是支持企业制定可持续发展的计划，同时呢，推动企业采取公正转型的行动。中国企联一直重视通过推动公正转型与社会保护，推动工作场所性别平等政策，开展系列的宣传倡议。 今年在 ILO 和这个联合国开发署共同发布了促进联合国可持续发展目标指南国际标准之后，中国企联正积极制定相应的标准。
Thirdly, supporting enterprises in formulating scientific and effective transition plans and promoting their just transition. The Chinese Enterprise Confederation has always attached great importance to working for just transition, social protection, and promoting policies for gender equality in the workplace. This year, the ISO and the UNDP jointly released the guidelines for contributing to the UN SDGs. CEC is actively studying this standard and organizing companies and social organizations to formulate sustainability standards for Chinese enterprises.
我相信，通过我们大家的共同努力，我们一定会为全球气候治理以及人类可持续发展、公正转型做出积极贡献，推动巴黎协定 全面有效地实行，携手应对全球环境与气候挑战，推动社会包容和经济繁荣。谢谢大家。
I believe that through our joint efforts, we will make due contributions to global climate governance and sustainable development of human society and just transition, promote the comprehensive and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement, jointly address global environmental and climate challenges, foster social inclusion and economic prosperity. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Mr. Tu. And we are now passing to a perspective from the workers. Mr. Fuat Alekberov is an advisor to the chair of Trade Unions Confederation of Azerbaijan. So you have 5 minutes to illustrate what is just transition for you in Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, okay. I'll try to be short. Dear conference participants, dear friends, yes, I'm representing the Azerbaijan Trade Unions Confederation, and we're here discussing very pressing issue facing the humanity, and that's not only the climate change, but also it's not just a climate issue, as has already been mentioned, but also the social and economic threat that affects not only the environment, but also the lives of millions of people, and especially workers. So we, as a trade unionist, should play a vital role in not only combating the effects of the climate change, but also in ensuring that the transition to green economy is just and fair, and workers' rights are protected, and environmental standards are met. And we're doing it mostly through our four main directions. First is lobbying legislative changes, legislative initiative actually. We're supporting all kind of legislative initiatives that promote creation and development of green jobs. That's including the promotion of policies encouraging the growth of the sectors in renewable energy. We're also providing trainings and courses to workers to help them to improve competitiveness in the labor market, and also to help them to get access to jobs in the green sector. Second area that we're working in is supporting sustainable enterprises. We're working with enterprises to incorporate sustainable practices into their production processes, to eliminate gas emissions, increase energy efficiency, and build resilience to climate risks. We're also working with enterprises in protection of labor rights, and ensure that safety working conditions are met, and also that they respect labor rights and provide fair wages. The last not the least, also with enterprises, we insist on having companies to develop their corporate social responsibility strategies to protect the environment, create jobs, and so on. Our third main direction in this area is to support just transition. And we work here. We demand social safety nets here. We demand social safety nets, and we want workers to have retraining programs, workforce redirection, and also social financial support, even financial support for those, especially for those ones that are affected the most by the loss of jobs, especially in carbon-intensive industries. We also we engage in government and in employer dialogue to create mechanisms for the protection of workers that are facing the change, and also inclusiveness, and we promote an inclusive economy that takes into account all the interests of all the segments of our population, especially youth and women and vulnerable groups. And the fourth and last not the least is the NDCs. We're providing assistance in achieving NDCs, and Azerbaijan government, as you know, is determined to become a champion in this area, and Azerbaijan is committed to reduce green gas emissions by 40% by 2050. We are diversifying energy system to increase the share of renewables in electricity generation to 30% by 2030. Also, we are reconsidering updating our national targets in the next NDC document to bring in line 1.5 degrees temperature reduction targets. So, considering all these, we are working as a trade unions. We play a principal role in monitoring and evaluating the implementation of national climate target contributions, such as reducing green gas emissions. And we're engaging with government and private sector to ensure transparency and accountability in the implementing climate policies. Also, we have developed a comprehensive strategy to just transition to an environmentally sustainable economy through the creation of green jobs in Azerbaijan, which takes into account environmental, social and economic aspects. So, dear friends, in conclusion, I would like to just emphasize that as a trade union, we support green jobs, sustainable enterprise and labor market reorientation, which is an important element of a just transition strategy aimed at achieving climate goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. A big round of applause. I think the panel has provided insights on how we do it from the perspective of the enterprises. And I think something very important that the three panelists address is the role of inserting the industry, but also the workers into the national development strategies. And second, transparency. Where are the mechanisms that exist, whether it's in the enterprises and openly to the public to see how much progress are we making. And third, including transition, just transition into the NDCs as a way also to benefit from other countries and also show your progress. So thank you to the three of you. You have been fantastic panelists. Thank you for this contribution.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all the panelists, and special thanks to Ms. Maria Jose Torres Macho, the representative of the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Chile, for an excellent moderation. And with that, not to lose the pace that we've developed so far, and since we're still a little bit behind the schedule, we'll skip the networking part and kind of the break, and we'll go straight to session 2, which will present another set of very interesting issues. We're going to speak about a call to action for a just transition with sustainable enterprises, enhancing the NDC's implementation process, how to integrate climate actions that target an inclusive and gender-responsive just transition. For another 60 minutes, we're going to have a very good panel of presenters, and I'm honored to give the floor to the facilitator, Ms. Vladanka Andreeva, the UN Resident Coordinator in Azerbaijan, to introduce the panel, the list of our panelists.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, and I hope you feel energized. This is still day 9 of COP29. Very important discussions are happening in the negotiation rooms, but also very important discussions have been happening in a number of side events, including here. So I was in and out, but I have been listening to the country experiences, and in the next hour and a half, and I promise I will try to get you out for dinner before 6 p.m., we are going to hear from few more countries on some of the challenges when it comes to the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions. What are the role of tripartite partnerships? How we can make sure that in the development of the NDCs, but also in its implementation, we are going to be inclusive, we are going to put gender lenses, but also we want to hear what are some of the challenges that countries are facing with right now, but also what are the opportunities. We'll do something similar. We will have 3 rounds of speakers, and I know that the original idea was to have 7 minutes. I would kindly ask you to try to make your intervention for 3 to 4 minutes max, so we have enough time and we are engaged. And I would like first to invite to join me for the very first panel my good friend, the Deputy Minister, Mr. Anar Karimov, Labor and Social Protection Deputy Minister for Azerbaijan. Anar, please. We are going to be also joined by Mr. Akhmadi Adilovich Sarbasov, the first Vice Minister, Ministry of Labor, Social Protection of Population from Government of Kazakhstan. Excellent. And do we have His Excellency Minister, First Deputy Minister Arba Pavich? Yes, fantastic. Please, next to me. So, Excellencies, 3 to 4 minutes. What are some of the experiences in your own countries when it comes to the national determined contributions, some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities? I understand that some of our presenters will speak in Russian. For the non-Russian speaking audience, the translation should be available. And I would like to invite, well, the host first. Anar, over to you.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Vladanka. It's always a pleasure to see you as a moderator. And I'm glad that we're continuing this dialogues towards the COP. And of course, I welcome everybody. We're very glad to see you in Azerbaijan, in Baku. Surely, the climate change is an environmental issue, but of course, the center of all this topic is not only environment. I mean, human factor, and of course, coming from a social background, we see a lot of cross-cutting matters, particularly social matters, and being a part of a social protection, of course, we see that there are a broader context of impact on a social protection system, particularly on vulnerable groups. And despite we're kind of a small country, but coming from Azerbaijani perspective, we see that there's a lot of pressure on vulnerable groups, and even a small natural disasters like earthquakes that happened like 5 years ago in Azerbaijan, or we had the floods in central part of Azerbaijan. It has implication for vulnerable groups, for low-income people, for elderly, people with disabilities, and of course youth and women. And we have a narrow focus that's more on a labor market. From one side, we see that we're losing traditional classic professions, but technological advancement and also innovation put pressure on bringing to the labor market the need for more qualified skills that are very well aligned with the green competences and bringing the issue of green jobs. Therefore, there are two categories of impact on a broader sense as a social matter, and also we see impact on a labor market that we take as a task from a climate resilient system. Therefore, when we talk about just transition, probably I should focus more on three groups of our measures. First measures will be to ensure and make it more systematic, more bolster universal social protection. Of course, we talk about making a decent living, particularly decent jobs, decent living conditions, particularly in the form of social payments. That's why the latest measures, first of all, were towards providing still a sustainable income for these vulnerable groups. The second one would be probably creating a sustainable employment, creating more jobs, and in this regard we have a broader labor support programs. For example, for last 6 years we managed to create more than 600 jobs. We managed to provide vocational training for 35,000 people, and in particularly we try to identify a new qualification standards that would bring more green competences to make the just transitions even smoother, even more efficient. And probably the last but not the least would be the access and quality of the services, because it's not always matter of a social resources, it's not always matter of labor and employment, but also is a matter of outreach to make this transition in order to have more implication and have a catalyst for more and more transition from a classic market from classic employment to more green employment. Probably that will be a major point at this point. Thank you very much.
Well, you have heard the host of COP29, the importance of social protection, and I think Anar has set an excellent example of short intervention, I believe under 3 minutes. So we will go now to Kazakhstan.
Спасибо. Спасибо большое. Да, если позволите, я на русском языке. Прежде всего хотел поблагодарить принимающую сторону, да, правительство, наших коллег с министерства за теплый прием, а также наших партнеров в лице Международной организации труда, вот если они с нами вместе присутствуют. Очень плодотворная площадка, на которой мы вырабатываем совместные подходы. Ну, если говорить о Казахстане, то страна у нас очень большая. Я сегодня повторял, у нас 9-я страна в мире, да, по площади. Понятно, что наши климатические изменения, вот если взять в целом регион Центральной Азии, он не превышает 1%, но все климатические изменения, которые происходят, в том числе в нашей стране, они наглядно демонстрируют, насколько нужно уделять этому внимание. Вот. Если мы говорим о статистике, то у нас получается каждые 5 лет, из них 2 года мы сталкиваемся с проблемой засухи, с проблемой воды. Отсюда вытекающие проблемы миграции населения вот из этих регионов и необходимости выработки более эффективных мер социальной защиты. У нас есть, в прошлом году мы утвердило правительство ОНУФ, обновленный доклад, есть у нас концепция зеленой экономики. Я в силу подготовки к этому мероприятию, конечно, их проанализировал, но я понял, исходя из, в том числе из рекомендаций Международной организации труда, что недостаточно в этих стратегических документов системы госпланирования изложены как раз-таки стандарты достойного труда и социальной защиты и зеленых рабочих мест. Поэтому, я думаю, мы вместе с нашими социальными партнерами, у нас сегодня трехсторонняя делегация, договорились уже принципиально, что этот вопрос он будет на повестке нашей ближайшей трехсторонней комиссии. Мы обязательно посвятим этому вниманию, и, конечно, будет вырабатывать соответствующие решения. Изменение климата, я повторюсь, наверное, это же не просто экологическая проблема, да? Это социальный вызов, прежде всего для нас. И мы не должны оставить эту проблему для будущего поколения. Что для этого мы сделаем? Вот, в рамках нашей концепции качественного рабочего места, которое правительство приняло буквально в декабре прошлого года, мы договорились, что мы будем внедрять в систему госпланирования стандарт качественного рабочего места. А что такое качественное рабочее место? Это как раз стандарт достойного труда. Это стабильная занятость, это достойная заработная плата. И, наверное, к этому стандарту мы будем подключать и экологический стандарт. Систему мониторинга в рамках госпланирования и зеленых рабочих мест мы уже договорились, что мы будем мониторить. Это очень важно, и, конечно, в рамках этой работы нужно четко понимать, насколько мы готовы вот в рамках наших взятых обязательств, там, в рамках Парижского соглашения, да, мы взяли на себя обязательства, что мы до 30-го года, с начала 90-го года, если брать, то мы на 15% готовы снизить выбросы. Это большой вызов для нашей страны, и в рамках этой работы, конечно, очень важно понимать, насколько мы будем продвигать вот стандарты зеленого рабочего места. Внутри этого стандарта очень много вопросов, да? Действующие рабочие места, насколько они адаптированы, да? Насколько квалификация действующих работников необходимо их усовершенствовать. И к этой работе мы, конечно, и систему квалификации подключаем. К этой работе мы уже разработали ряд атласов профессий по базовым отраслям экономики, а также профессиональные стандарты, которые позволяют нам уже, ну, скажем, на уровне микронавыков наглядно показывать и через систему повышения квалификации и обучающих грантов вовлекать в этот процесс больше работников. Это первое. Поскольку вот я статистику приведу, у нас на сегодня только порядка 8% да, работодателей тратит на повышение квалификации. Мы считаем это очень недостаточно. Мы этот стандарт должны увеличивать. Я не буду говорить о стандартах становится, но тем не менее мы над этим работаем. Ну и, конечно, и обучающие гранты. В этом плане у нас есть принципиальная договоренность с нашими профильными естественными, высшей науки и среднее специальное образование, что гранты в этом направлении будут увеличиваться. Гранты, обучающиеся навыкам зеленой экономики, в частности. Это первое. Второе, конечно, это социальная защита. Те изменения, которые будут происходить, они по-любому будут происходить, да, на фоне изменений необходимости вложения, да, вот, в систему энергетики, да, роста тарифов. Как в этих условиях мы будем защищать рабочие места? Нужно понимать, что это прежде всего затронет наших социально уязвимых слоев населения, малообеспеченных. Поэтому мы готовы через там, систему субсидирования вносить соответствующий вклад в механизм жилищной помощи, механизм адресной поддержки малообеспеченных граждан, чтобы вот как-то нивелировать те риски, которые они влекут вот те изменения, которые происходят на рынке труда. Конечно, вот эту всю работу мы будем проводить вместе с нашими социальными партнерами. В основе всей этой работы должен быть здоровое социальное партнерство, и мы принципиально, я думаю, у нас в этом плане вопросов нет, и мы будем реализовать стандарты достойного труда. Спасибо большое.
Thank you, First Vice Minister Sarbazov, and we will continue with Kyrgyzstan. Arbapayevich, First Deputy Minister.
Спасибо большое. Здравствуйте еще раз, уважаемые участники. Прежде всего, еще раз позвольте поблагодарить Республику Азербайджан за столь такую масштабную организацию COP29, а также наших партнеров, Международную организацию труда. Еще раз по теме, сегодняшняя актуальная тема, это вот справедливый переход. Изменение климата — это глобальный вызов, который требует от нас ответственных решений, направленных на минимизацию его последствий и создание устойчивых путей развития для всех стран. Однако сам процесс адаптации и трансформации экономики не должен усугублять социальное неравенство и оставлять в стороне наиболее уязвимые группы населения. Семьи и дети в первую очередь страдают от негативных последствий климатических изменений. Изменение климата — это не только угроза для физического здоровья, но и психоэмоциональная. Также труд и занятость в условиях справедливого перехода также становится очень особенно актуальной. Мы сталкиваемся с необходимостью переподготовки работников и создания новых рабочих мест в зеленых секторах экономики. Одним из ключевых стратегических действий Министерства труда и социального обеспечения Кыргызской Республики в этом вопросе это должна быть разработка мер, национальной программы по социальной адаптации социально уязвимых слоев населения. Это создание благоприятной нормативной базы, включение понятий, как мои коллеги отметили, достойная заработная плата, достойный труд, а также усиливать меры по профобучению и социальной защиты. Кроме этого, Министерству необходимо также усиливать региональное и международное сотрудничество по обмену опытом в вопросе справедливого перехода. Общественность также должна быть вовлечена в этом вопросе. Спасибо большое.
Role in this aspect.
Thank you very much, and I think it's very interesting how across the three countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Azerbaijan, the need for social protection, decent jobs, as part of the just transition, have been emphasized. Excellencies, thank you very much for your reflections. I think you do deserve another round of applause, and you can leave the podium. And I'm keeping the fast pace for this afternoon. So we are moving now with the second panel. Apologies, just let me see. There has been some changes. Allow me to invite now to the stage the Deputy Minister Ministry of Labor, Migration and Employment from Government of Tajikistan, Your Excellency Tavlat Soda, to join me at the stage. Yes, please. And our second speaker will be Professor Dr. Alpakan, Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Security, Turkey. Similar questions for you. What are some of the examples that you have back home in your own countries when it comes to the development of the nationally determined contributions, just transitions, but also maybe some of the good practices that you're willing to share with the neighboring countries? So, over to you first.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, I would like ask our welcoming speech on behalf of the delegation of Tajikistan for organizing this big event and inviting us to participate and to share and to discuss all issues related to the climate change, especially with the labor items. So, as you know, Tajikistan is one of the countries in the region which has initiative globally, especially in the climate change. We have 5 initiatives which is approved by the resolution by the United Nations. And at the same time, in a country, we have now underlined to realize some special strategic plan for how to support or how to work with the issues related to climate change. First of all, last in 2024 especially, we already established 3 new job skill centers, which already has occupation related to the climate change, especially on energy sector, on tourism. Now we are now in the line to open these new centers, and one of them is agriculture. So now we underline to finalize draft new law on assistance to the labor in Tajikistan, which should be harmonized through the international standards. And I already mentioned on the morning session, we are working together, very close work with ILO representative in a country, also in regional offices. And now we are working to continue our cooperation on decent work, and I hope representatives are here, and we already continue to work and to put our support for in the future for implementation of this global initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's encouraging to hear, first of all, the close collaboration with my colleagues from ILO, but also the approach that you have taken with the creation of these 3 centers to aid the jobs, but also ensure that at the labor market we have the right skill set and people have opportunity and access to jobs. Moving to Turkey.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the government of Azerbaijan for organizing this very beautiful organization, and especially ILO also for organizing this event here about just transition. If I may, I want to give some examples about the lessons we have so far learned about just transition efforts. Especially, we cannot separate twin transformations, digital and green, together. All of them constitute a challenge for the labor force, especially for those who have traditional professions in various sectors and remote regions in our country and all over the world. So, especially, we have some specific challenges, including skills mismatch or the needs for new skills in newer digital and green jobs, etc. So, what are the difficulties or obstacles that we have experienced? Especially within the last 8 to 10 years, in our country, our government started a zero waste initiative and generally fight against climate change. And even we changed the name of our ministry for urbanization and environment. We added the phrase climate change to the name of the ministry. Environment, urbanization and climate change ministry. So for our ministry, I think it was in 2 years before COVID pandemic, we started new initiatives. We are lucky because we have some very well organized institutions for labor agencies and vocational labor. We have a vocational qualifications organization, which is a related institution of our ministry. So about more than 5 years ago, we started to classify green jobs and develop national vocational standards, national occupational standards for them. So when our students or graduates finish the courses from these vocational areas, they got the Europass, so they can work in all over Europe with these certificates. But first of all, we need them in our country, of course. So we have 49 national occupational standards for green jobs, and about 1,000 for all other jobs. So this is something prestigious. But what will happen to the brown jobs? So according to ILO statistics, as far as I know, there will be 15 million new green jobs, and for our country within 5 years we have an opportunity to create about 300,000 green jobs again. But there is also a risk of losing jobs of traditional people, about 5 million people in all over the world within the upcoming 5 years. And also in our country, 1/5 of the labor force is under this threat of losing jobs. So how we can fight with them? We need to take precautions. We need to be proactive. Thanks Allah, we have also some institutions, agencies, for example, Turkish employment agency. And we are a bit resilient because of the problems that we face every year. Before pandemic, economical crisis, supply chain crisis, then pandemic, unemployment, and afterwards again regional wars all over Turkey, north, east, everywhere there are lots of wars and supply chain problems. And also after the pandemic, we faced higher inflation. Again, this was an opportunity for labor markets, of course. There is a positive correlation between employment and inflation. So, as far as we discovered, according to the European Commission's declaration of Industry 5.0, sustainability should go hand by hand with human centrism and resilience. So resilience is something very critical to fight all these problems, especially environmental crises, even earthquakes, for example, natural disasters. And last year we faced a huge disaster in
11 cities in southern part of our country, and we try to recover them. So in just transition, as you know, there are three pillars: distributive justice, procedural justice, and restorative justice. So when you restore something, you need to recover the harms and problems of vulnerable people especially. And we developed programs specifically for this earthquake region. And earthquakes, I have to say, because at the very same day, 4 big earthquakes happened, all of them under the ground, not in ocean or somewhere else, under the ground of the central cities. So what kind of specific programs we conducted? We tried to prioritize most vulnerable people. For example, women, disabled individuals, etc. So we learned that if we concentrate on those people who are in need, they respond to these programs. So they are willing to join us, and this year we started 2 new programs: job positive program for specifically women, and workforce participation program for those who are newly graduated but never entered to the job market. We can say for the youngsters and housewives. So in both of them, the job offers were not specifically designed for women, but most of the applicants were women. So we could reach women, and as far as I remember, 60% of the beneficiaries for both the programs were women. And specifically for the workforce participation program, it was much more than this, because this program was a part-time program, and housewives were very suitable for part-time programs. So we learned from this experience that if we design suitable programs for the vulnerable people, they may join us. So these were proactive programs, because the just transition is in its infancy. So that's why we are proactive. We are not reactive, because we didn't face huge amount of job losses until today. But we should be ready for them. And if we take precautions in different disasters or problems, we understood that beforehand you can you can begin to collect the fruits. I think it is enough for this.
Oh, it really struck a chord with me, as you said, that just transition is in its infancy. And that's why we really need to look at the local context, local communities, the 2 examples that you have given, how the government of Turkey has addressed the needs of local population after the earthquakes, the 2 programs that you have designed specifically to attract women, housewives for all the country. So it was beyond the earthquake. Excellent. But I also liked the way that you have said we're going to have green jobs that we're going to design, but we have the brown jobs, right? So what do we do to strike the right balance and reskill the employee? Well, basically the workers that we have right now as part of the workforce. Well, thank you very much. I think our second panel deserves a big round of applause. Thank you. And we are moving with a super fast pace to the 3rd round, and we are going to have 3 speakers joining me. I will have Ms. Jelena Vasic, who is the Employment Advisor, Labor and Employment Sector, Ministry of Labor of Serbia. Jelena? Then I would like to invite Mr. Azerbaijan, who is Director General Labor Center of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, who I don't see right now. And then, okay, he's coming. And then Jörg, please, Jörg Linke, head of GAZ Competence Center for Climate Change, and his Page Action Partner. So while we are waiting for Mr. Azar to join us, I understand he's on his way. Jelena, what can you tell us from Serbian experiences?
Thank you so much, Vladanka. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I would just like to thank the group of panelists before. They were extraordinary in their presentations. I would like just to highlight that Serbia adopted the Integrated National Energy and Climate Plan for the period up to 2030 with vision up to 2050. And another very important public policy document is the Program for Adaptation to Change Climate Conditions for the period 2023-2030. Why? Because in this document, besides the objectives concerning the adaptation to climate change, a special focus is given to a group of populations that are under or can be under the strike of different climate change or economy transformation. Since I'm basically expert in the area of employment and active labor market measures, I would like to highlight the importance of cross-sectoral cooperation and harmonization on different policies, activities, measures, and interventions, especially when it comes to people in need or vulnerable groups, because, of course, equal opportunities should be an overarching goal in all areas, but especially when it comes to integration into the labor market or reintegration, it has to be efficient, it has to be sustainable, and it has to be underpinned by all standards of decent work. Why? Because the impossibility to integrate or reintegrate into the labor market in adequate way, there will be very often changes in personal and professional life and behavior. There will be a lack of motivation, activation, mobility. There will be an absence of acquired knowledge and skills, and very often, which is underpinned by several speakers before me, dependence on the benefits from the social protection system. I will just have to highlight some key points, if you allow me, from this morning preparatory session discussion that we had. It was very interesting. It was very fruitful. We all said that a strong social consensus between different policy creators, social partners, representatives of international community is in place. But firstly, we have to build our knowledge continuously on what green jobs concept is. Why? To know what do we need, what are the resources, what are the data, do we have the data, how to build or use mechanisms, how to monitor and evaluate what has been done. Also, we highlighted that intensifying cooperation between different policy portfolios and in the sense of temporal and conceptual compliance of measures is of great importance to have prosperous and green societies. So basically, I have to say that this today's day was very important for me, and that we are all in the same, like Minister Babaev said, green road, just to have a clear focus where we are and where we want to be. Thank you.
That's excellent, Jelena, and thank you for reminding us of the discussion earlier this afternoon. Indeed, we are all on the same green road, and it's important to continue to share knowledge, but also share better understanding what, as you said, green jobs are, and that might vary from a country to a country and from a context to a context. So Moving on to York, what are some of the experiences of GIZ, and particularly you are a page action partner, and most probably you have a bit of sense what some of your implementing partners' struggles or some of good practices are when it comes to just transition and participation in the development of the new NDCs.
Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Andreeva. Thank you for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to reflect on the critical theme of advancing in just transition that integrates climate action with inclusivity, gender responsiveness, and sustainable enterprises. This discussion is not just about meeting commitments under the NDC, but about designing solutions that resonate with the lived reality of people, particularly those most affected by climate change and economic transition. Let me pick up some of the important points that you have just raised and that are relevant from the point of view of GIZ as an international organization and development partner. So first, there is climate action as opportunity for inclusion. The shift to a low-carbon economy offers opportunities to address systematic inequalities. However, without deliberate action, these opportunities can easily widen gaps instead of closing them. Climate action must go beyond technical solutions and integrate social considerations. For example, renewable energy and sustainable enterprises can provide new employment opportunities, but this requires a workforce equipped with the necessary skills. Women, youth and marginalized groups must not only be beneficiary but active participants in this transformation. Targeted policies such as gender quota in training programs or financial support for women-led green enterprises are essential to ensure inclusion. Secondly, the role of enterprises in a just transition. Sustainable enterprises are vital in bridging economic and environmental goals. Enterprises are where innovations happen and jobs are created. However, for this to work, we need enabling ecosystems. First of all, we need to guarantee access to finance. Small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly in development countries, often face barriers to accessing the funds necessary to adopt green technologies or scale sustainable business models. And there should be a kind of policy alignment. Governments and development agencies must provide clear and supportive regulatory frameworks that incentivize green and inclusive entrepreneurship. An excellent example of this is the promotion of social enterprises that integrate climate resilience into their business model, such as cooperative working in agroecological or renewable energy projects owned by local communities. And thirdly, the gender-responsive climate action, in my opinion, one of the most important. Gender responsiveness is not just a moral imperative, it is also practical. Women often hold critical knowledge about local ecosystems and are disproportionately affected by climate impacts. Empowering women to lead and to participate in climate action is smart investment in resilience. One effective strategy is ensuring that women's voice are included in policy dialogue and planning processes. This requires dismantling structural barriers such as unequal access to education, land and decision-making platforms. Programs that offer women-specific technical training, leadership development and access to capital can shift the dynamic. The integration with NDCs, in my opinion, is as well very important. So national determined contributions are powerful tools to drive actions, but their implementation must be inclusive and equitable. Here, development agencies, governments and enterprises must work together. They have to strengthen local capacities. This ensures that climate projects are tailored to community needs. they have to involve social partners. Workers, unions, and civil society organizations must have a seat at the table to advocate for social safeguards and equitable benefit distribution. And lastly, tracking equity outcomes. Countries must include metrics to measure inclusivity and gender impacts within their NDCs reporting frameworks. So, ladies and gentlemen, the urgency of climate change calls for bold, inclusive action. A just transition is not just about reducing emission, it's about building societies that are resilient, equitable and sustainable. By centering climate actions around people, especially the most vulnerable, we can make the promise of a just transition reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jörg. And that was a very powerful call in the end that the just transition needs to be people-centered, needs to be inclusive, and I do agree with you. The development of the new national determined contributions is just the first phase, if you will. It will be really very important that all partners and its cross-sectoral approach when it comes to the implementations of the new NCDs. It's very fitting that we are going to end up the last panel for this afternoon session with a representative from the host country. So, Mr. Bayramov, you are Director General of the Labor Center of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is a relatively new entity, correct? Established just a few months ago. So do tell us, well, last year. Do tell us, what are some of your experiences and what is your role with the member states that you cover to shepherd them through this process of NDCs and just transition?
Thank you very much, Vladanka. The distinguished guests, dear colleagues. Indeed, our labor center is most recent institution, specialized institution of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. As you well aware, Organization of Islamic Cooperation is the second largest international organization after United Nations, and it has different specialized institutions and agencies, and one of them is Labor Center, which was established in Baku last year. I would like also to thank International Labour Organization for organization of this policy dialogue today, and also I was very glad to meet representatives from our member countries in the meeting. The Labour Center is a strategic international organization aimed to consolidate, to empower labor, employment, social protection, and human capital development among our member states. Our mission is to enhance labor conditions, promote employment, decent work, and foster social protection across our member states. Just transition is not merely an environmental imperative, it's a social one. It calls for us to ensure that no one is left behind as we move towards sustainable practices. This means prioritizing inclusivity and gender responsiveness in all initiatives. Women and other vulnerable groups often bear the brunt of climate change impacts, yet they are also pivotal in driving solutions. The key approaches might include such strategies as empowering women and other vulnerable groups through creating pathways for women and underserved populations to participate in decision-making processes related to climate actions. Their insights are invaluable in crafting effective strategies. Promoting sustainable enterprises, as according to World Economic Forum report from 2023, 1 in 2 social enterprises around the world are led by women, compared to 1 in 5 conventional enterprises. Equipping women and other marginalized groups with necessary competences and assistance so that they can initiate social ventures will not only contribute to economic growth, but also create jobs that are resilient to climate impact. The third, investing in education and training programs to fill in the skill gaps through enhancing workforce with the necessary skills to adapt to changing job markets influenced by climate action. Let us reaffirm our commitment to a just transition that is inclusive and gender responsive. Together we can pave the way for sustainable enterprises that enhance the implementation of our NDCs while ensuring that every voice is heard and valued. I would like, I emphasized a lot the gender issue. I would like also to mention that our organization is very well gender balanced, and we have 50 to 50 men and women among our staff. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward for discussions today. Thank you.
Many thanks, Cesar. And this is actually an invitation, as we are doing very well with the time, for the audience. If you have any questions, not just for the panelists, we still have some of the other panelists with us, or if you have a comment, a reflection, a good practice that you would like to share. So just raise your hand. Oh, please, go ahead. No. Please stay. Would you like to? No. Okay. Do we have an extra mic or just take this?
Thank you. Okay. Well, my name is Nilufar, and I'm from Uzbekistan. I'm working for the Ministry of Employment and Poverty Reduction of my country, and I'm working as a head of International Relations Department. So I would like to mention that Uzbekistan, our business, our trade unions, our government, we are facing with the same obstacles related to climate change as many other countries. And still in our country we need to align macroeconomic policies with this new green agenda, with new green policies. And for this, for example, Uzbekistan adopted already the strategy for climate change until 2030, and also government developed action plan on climate change. But at the same time, as I told you, policies are not aligned still, and another challenge that there are lack of knowledge about this national action plan among not only our constituents, but also among all other partners. And for example, the government already received some comments and suggestions from workers' organizations related to conducting comprehensive social protection strategies that will include policies directed to these people who are coming to the labor market from all these sectors where we have this using of new renewable energy, or especially with focus to vulnerable groups of populations, women, because all this just transition period, it's not about fair transition for women. Plus, we are working on adapting employment and labor market policies into the new this green agenda. And for example, today the president of Uzbekistan, he calls that the next year in Uzbekistan will be for promotion of green transition and environmental protection. So next year, hopefully, all employment and social protection and macroeconomic policies will be aligned with green policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing Uzbekistan experience. And again, harmonization of policies, it's very important. And it's just a testament to what you have said, that one ministry can't deal with climate action. And we do need not just whole government approach, we do need whole society approach. Any additional reflection, comments from the audience? You can just raise your hand or stand. Yes, please. Just come forward because it's much easier. It seems like this is the mic. And same drill. Present yourself and then share your thoughts.
Thank you. My name is Rishabh and I'm from the International Labour Organization. I'm in the Department for Sustainable Enterprises, Productivity and a Just Transition. It's been very interesting to hear you all, even the previous panelists, but one place where I would be very curious to learn more from you is we see that the NDC process is moving forward quickly now. We have a few months left before countries finalize their NDCs. And often one hears that ministries of labor and ministries of environment do not engage with each other on the NDC process. How could this collaboration be strengthened while also bringing together our workers and employers organizations and taking forward social dialogue when NDCs are framed? And for us, of course, the issue of sustainable enterprises being integrated within the NDCs is also very important. As you aptly put, it's a site for creating jobs. It's the engine for job creation, decent job creation. So that's one point I'd have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent provocative question. Let me start by asking my panelists here on the stage. Do you have an answer for that? Do you, for instance, in the case of Serbia, have you started developing your new national determined contributions? Has Ministry of Labor was part of the discussions?
Yes, we had, but again, more on this social protection and human resource development side. As I said in one of the documents, the focus is on vulnerable population, but also within the employment strategy of the Republic of Serbia for the period 21-26, we highlighted the importance that the green jobs, even though we do not have a clear definition what it is compromised of, what it is consisted of, we highlighted that green jobs must be fully in line with all the standards of decent work and the labor rights. And we also opened the door to further cooperation with our social partners. I just have to highlight that in the end of the October, with the support of the ILO, we had a big 2 days event with our social partners on sustainable development and just transition and migration. So I hope that is just first among many different events or experience sharing knowledge that we will have in our country, but also in places like this.
Thank you so much. Would like to add?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very interesting question. In my opinion, it's a question of a narrative, how you frame it, how to phrase it. And I think you will never achieve your climate impact goals without looking into the just dimension. So if you understand just transition rightly, you have the two pillars. You have the climate impact, which is more or less easy to measure, at least to achieve as another, and it's a different question. And on the other hand, you have the just dimension, and the just dimension is justice, intergenerational justice, gender justice, distribution justice, process justice, and so on. So if you don't take in consideration the just dimension, you will never achieve your NDC goals. So you have to phrase it, you have to frame it, and you have to build and communicate a good narrative on this. And I think this gives us good arguments to bring together the different ministries, like, for example, environment ministries and other ministries working on the social dimension. I think without that, and it's an interdisciplinary work, and I think you have to frame it and communicate like this.
Any experiences from Azerbaijan in terms of the development of the new NDC, Deputy Minister? Thoughts to share, yeah?
Thank you very much. Actually, just transition is just a process, and the most important things, we have a proverb probably in these regions that the most difficult thing is to start the process. So we started this process. This is a transition. We know that where we're moving, and the most importantly, I believe that NDCs for us a kind of an objective where there's always room for improvement. And particularly now we heard a lot of presentation from different stakeholders, and that's the beauty, that's the added value of this forum. Though Azerbaijan is organizer, but actually this is a global event, and we're just providing the venue and the people through the presentation, ideas, again showing the commitment that we're sharing these values, where we would like to move. We have this intention, we have commitment and energy to move forward. And I believe that the more we talk, we have to put into action, and NDCs was just another format for us to formulate our objectives. And with NDCs, already Minister of Energy and State Oil Company and others already putting forward some ambitious plan. And we are there as also important stakeholder to put a social aspect, so it's not only environmental issue, but we have a holistic approach. And I'm glad to see that at today's event as a benchmark, most of my colleagues, particularly for Central Asia, international organization, particularly UN organization, thanks to you, ILO team is well represented today. So I believe probably I can formulate my speech also into some remarks, maybe not to take the floor again as a closing remark from my side as a host country. I believe that we have to put all these precious ideas that we expressed today into the next actions. Today we shared achievements, but I believe I would like to invite all participants today maybe to formulate and to put our ambition to the next stage and to form some kind of a working group. And we had already discussion with ILO Secretariat. They have a very professional team with their support who kindly agreed to put it and act as a secretariat for this working group, where the ideas that today were expressed, we can put already as concrete action, and that will be another contributions, not only to NDCs, but also action that we can share as a next scope. And with that, I give the floor to you back.
Thank you very much, and I think that does speak volumes about walking the talk. So we do not stop really with sharing experiences, but we continue in this setup, and I like the idea because COP29 presidency will continue to guide COP30 presidency, and I think it's excellent, particularly if I have a note from my colleagues from ILO that are going to support this effort and have a working group, because at the end of the day, yes, NDCs are just the very first milestone, but there is more to be done. But before I kind of wrap up this session, you wanted to say a few things more?
Just I will have quick reaction to the question. So at the end of the day, when you the combating the climate change is about the cooperation between synergies and cooperation and synergies between government agencies, civil society, international organizations, donors, because when we talk about just transition, it's about the labor resilience, about the skill gaps. So it's difficult to draw the borders between the functions of the different government agencies, who is responsible for what. It's a merging tasks, and there is the only way lays through cooperation and joint action. Thank you.
I completely agree. This is not something that can be dealt by individual, one ministry or one organizations. The national determined contributions are meant to be an economy-wide document. And we usually want to say within the UN family that we would like to take the NDCs as the investment plan for one country. We would like to make sure that the countries do see this as an opportunity to make their economies competitive, to make sure that they see this as an opportunity that their workforce is competitive. And you have all spoken, not just in these three last panels, but also earlier this afternoon, about reskilling, about new skills, about digitalization as well, and how you're addressing these challenges. And most importantly, these new investment plans, the new NDCs 3.0, have to come hand in hand with a human development plan. And this COP29 has been really quite unique in that sense. On Monday, we had the first Human Development Day. We spoke a lot about inclusive process, about the role that young people need to play and their voices, about having gender perspective, and I'm glad that that came through in your contributions as well. Now I would like to invite you to give a round of applause for this last panel and the two panels before. And I will hand over to the master of the ceremony. Fuad, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vladanka. Well, I would also like to join the most positive comments on the previous panelists, but I would like to request a separate round of applause to our wonderful moderator, Vladanka Andreeva, who brought us perfectly in line with our schedule, so that we're now a little bit ahead of it, yet we won't kind of too much abuse of that. And to close this very first and I would say very productive day of our session, well, I would like to give the floor for closing remarks once again to Mr. Anar Alikperov, the Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Azerbaijan. But before we give the floor to His Excellency Deputy Minister, there is one more person to make closing remarks, and she's going to address us online. With that, it's our pleasure to invite Ms. Raya Weiss-Kjelgaard, Enterprises Department Director of ILO Page Board member, and she's going to address us online. So let's ask the technical personnel to switch Ms. Raya Weiss-Kjelgaard.
Так, еще раз вас благодарю, господин модератор.
Good afternoon to all distinguished participants, to the delegates, and of course also to my colleagues from the UN. I do think that first and foremost, I really want to greet you all on behalf of the Action on Green Economy page, and that means UNITAR, it means UNDP, UNEP, and the ILO. And I'm speaking to you on behalf of PAGE. So please, my big thanks to you for also giving me a space to address you. I really appreciate that. I do want to thank all of you for having been in this, for us, very important event, taking your time here at COP29 to be here, to share with us all experiences. And I have followed the discussion with a lot of attention and interest, because what you have actually already shared is enormously important, not only for, I would say, each country, but for all of us to learn from and to be inspired by. Now, I would want to make 2 points, Mr. Moderator, and I want to center it around, first and foremost, what also the Minister very well put at the beginning in his opening, the just transition and the just transition for all, and how important this is. And with that, I want to say that it is very clear that in the interventions, it is all about appreciating how the climate changes do impact an economy and a society, and how it really also especially impacts vulnerable groups, women and youth. You have all spoken to that. It's also about analyzing being able to measure and to monitor actually what is the impact and on all. And again, I want to highlight especially vulnerable groups. It's very much also about developing and implementing the necessary policies that can actually deliver the just transition for all. And then obviously, as you have all highlighted, it's about involving all players and not least the real economy players, the businesses and the workers, to participate in developing those policies. That has to happen through social dialogue and social consensus building, as I very much heard coming through all the interventions. The second point I want to make is what is also part of the title of the event, from vision to practice. And here very much I have heard very strongly how all have called about, it's about seizing mitigating the impact of the climate change and seizing the opportunities that are also embedded in the transition. But most important is maybe to say that each country, each country has its own vision, has its own plans for its country. And that is why the emphasis on the national determined contributions is such an important, as Vedanta has just said, investment framework for the country, where then what you are hopefully seeing useful from the UN, we can support you in implementing. And here again, this sharing of experiences and practices, what has worked, how it has worked, is fundamentally critically important. And again, we are happy that this event can hopefully contribute to that. I was particularly happy to hear that there's already been talks about establishing a working group. And if it is useful both pages, and I'm sure the rest of the UN, and certainly I can also speak on behalf of the ILO, we are delighted to support this extensively. And that will be the point. Whatever is the vision to practice, whatever technical assistance that the UN and PAGE can support you on, be it social protection, skills development policies, sustainable enterprises development, industrial policies, how to finance it, etc., we are at your disposal. So, Mr. Moderator, I think I will conclude with this for now. And again, thank you to everyone for the very rich discussions and the strong participation in this important event. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Rai Weiss-Kjelgaard. And for our final closing remarks, I would like to give the floor to the representative of host party, His Excellency Anar Aliyev, Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Protection of the Population of the Republic of Azerbaijan.
Thank you. Once again, dear delegates, esteemed guests, I thank everyone for participation, and it was a great honor to have you all. You made this event happen. Thank you for your excellent views, ideas. We'll try to put them into our next action and documentation. I have two good news for you. First good news that we conclude today's session 1. And the second good news that we'll have continuation tomorrow morning. So have a very nice evening. Have more energy to continue tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I'd like to congratulate all of us on a very successful first day. I would like to